Morning class. It's going to be an interesting class today. I don't have my glasses. I left them at home. So beware. I'll just go blind. It's okay. I was supposed to announce this morning that the sermon for today is about prayer, and there's a handout. So if you're interested in having a handout, make sure you get that message from Cody. We're in John, and we were in chapter 11 last week. And we covered the emotions that must have existed between the family of Lazarus and Martha and Mary and Christ, who evidently had a friendship bond. And because of the threats that Jesus had on himself and his disciples, he had left and gone to the area where John had been baptizing, where his ministry first began. And then he gets word that Lazarus has passed away or was sick. And he returned in spite of the fact that they were trying to kill him. He returned. And we went through the resurrection event last week, and I won't go through that again. You know that story. It's one of the best known stories in all the New Testament. I didn't say it was most important. It says it's one of the best known. But I want you again to go with me back to that event, the "you are there" type Walter Cronkite thing I mentioned last week. You were there. And you have no doubt that Lazarus was dead. People had come from Jerusalem about 2 miles away. They were there with Mary to comfort her and Martha. Lazarus had been dead at this point in chapter 11, had been dead for a few days, and in the Jewish world, decomposition had already set in. He was defiled. You can't touch the dead unless you have a ceremonial cleansing before you go to Jerusalem to take the Passover. And so the crowd had gathered. And you remember how Jesus, it says, he cried out. The Greek word there is mega. It's where I think where we get the word megaphone. Mega, a loud voice, big, just shouting, if you will, to get the attention of everybody who was there. Because he told the Father, he said, I said this for the people so that they could hear. Lazarus, come forth. Just imagine in your mind, you're there. You've come all the way from Jerusalem down there for the funeral and to comfort the family. And the man they call Yeshua cries out, Lazarus, come forth. In my mind, I think that crowd became as silent as you guys are right now. What's going to happen? This is like where they say the rubber meets the road. Because if Lazarus doesn't come out of that tomb, out of that cave, then it's over. The ministry of Christ is done. Because he is evidently not who he says he is. And so in that deafening silence, all eyes are on that cave. It's interesting to me because they say that they had wrapped him up like they do people and they put the spices on him, etc. But as I was reading some research that in those days, the Jews, even today, don't go through the mummification process like they did Joseph when he was in Egypt. They did that because he was in Egypt, and that was the Egyptian way of doing it. But the Jews, they don't do the process of preserving the body. They go back to, and your body will return to dust, and they hold that as sacred, and so they don't. All they do is wrap and put the ointments on them out of respect, and decomposition sets in almost immediately. He's been wrapped. How did he walk? Well, they say that it wasn't a mummification wrap. It was like the wraps that the Jews used when they buried Jesus. And they had a napkin for his face, and they had wrapped his arms and wrapped his legs, but he could still walk. And don't you know that as they watched that cave, here comes the man who was dead walking out. What would you have said? What would you have done? What would you have believed? And so when you read the text, the people were amazed. And it says, and many believed. But it says some of the Pharisees who saw it went back to Jerusalem and told the people of the synagogue what had happened. And it's just amazing to me that instead of saying, wow, he really said, come forth, Lazarus, and he did after he was in the grave, after decomposition had taken place and the smell. He came out. No, they said, we got to get rid of this man, because if we don't, the Bible says that they said the Romans will come and they'll take our nation and they'll take us and we'll be no more. We've got to put this man to death. Yeah.
And that tells you just how far off the track that the Jewish leaders were. It didn't matter what he did. He messed around with one of our laws of don't do this on the Sabbath, and instead of going in total amazement, this is somebody's special. They got him every time. Most of them.
You ever heard that saying, I can't believe my own eyes? Yeah, I think there were a lot of folks there that they couldn't believe their own eyes. There he was, but how can you do that? How can you call a man from the death and then have him walk out? How can that happen? How can that happen? Wouldn't logic seem to reign supreme at that moment? Like he may, if he can do that,
Especially to our religious people.
yeah,
You know, you're not talking about people out on the side of the road. You're talking about religious people.
his own kindred, if you will. Yeah.
Their group of the Pharisees was a group, kind of a ruling group, was the one that stood out anyway in the Jewish.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, they just saw their power slipping away, and that's why they said, like you said in verse 48, they see that happening. If we don't do something, the Romans are going to come and stop us and take away our place, our position of power, and our nation.
Exactly.
And so they wanted to, their pride and their prejudices, I guess, took over. But they wanted to maintain their position of power. And they were willing to do whatever they wanted, whatever they could do to stop it.
Yeah.
Even though they saw that miracle, they accused him of being of the devil, of Satan. It's all being done by Satan. Anything to change the thoughts and the minds of people, and that's what we have that going on today as well.
Exactly. I can't read the verse, but it's like verse 50, I believe it is, or something like that. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them the things which Jesus had done. So they obviously knew he had done it. It wasn't anybody. It was this man. It was this man that had caused so much trouble, that has tucked this man out of the tomb, out of the grave. And therefore the chief priests and the Pharisees convened a council and were saying, what are we doing? This man's performing all kinds of signs, many signs. And if we let him go, if we let him go on like this, men will believe in him. Here's their logic. The men will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. That's their focus. Here's my question. And one of the two of you just said that. Here's the question. Where were these God-fearing Jews? Where were they with their confidence that God was with them as a nation, and God would never, ever let his nation be taken away. They believed they were God's people. Well, if you're God's people, then you've got God on your side. And if you've got God on your side, what have you to fear? But they were afraid. They were afraid that God would let the Romans come and take them as a nation. Where did they get such an idea? Perhaps it was because the Babylonian, the conquerors that came, and perhaps it was that. Perhaps it was the Greeks, like Alexander the Great came and conquered everything. Where was their faith? What was their faith bound? I don't quite understand the logic of saying this man is a fake, and if we don't kill him, the Romans are going to come and take our nation. What kind of logic is that? I can't figure that out. They were steeped in their own philosophy and ideas.
Weren't they already under some Roman rule?
The Romans had their military stationed throughout, but the Jews were allowed to function as a group subject to the Roman laws and what have you.
The Romans were allowing them to continue on as a nation and practice their religion or their beliefs at that time. So they were afraid. Part of it is they were afraid that if they contradicted or caused an uproar or something happened that caused an uproar, then the Romans would come in and put them back under more
Strict rules.
strict rules.
Matter of fact, it was in, I think it was AD 30, just a few years before Christ was crucified, that the Romans said, you Jews cannot crucify anybody anymore without our approval. That was about 3 or 4 years before. And that was an interesting decision that was made because it affects the way the scriptures reveal that they had to go before the Romans. So it was not just the Jews, but it was the Romans and the Jews, which means Gentiles and Jews. That means all people. That's all there were. You're a Gentile or a Jew. That all the people were responsible for the death of Christ. It's the way I read it, the way I understand it. You may argue with that if you like, but that's okay with me. That's the way I understand it. That the whole world, Jew and Gentile, together.
Romans had placed Herod, if I may be mistaken about who, but I'm thinking the Romans had placed Herod in the beginning of Jesus' birth. He was put in place as a ruler or king.
Puppet.
Puppet.
Yeah. It would appear. That's the way it would appear. One of the high priests, the head of the synagogue, Caiaphas, he speaks up now. Listen to his. I don't think he knew what he was saying because he was prophesying about it. But listen to what he said. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You don't know nothing at all. You just don't know what you're doing, guys." To me, that says, "Wow, Caiaphas must realize something here," because he says, "Oh, you guys, you don't know anything." But listen to what he says. "Nor do you take into account that it's expedient for you that one man die for the people, and that the whole nation will not perish." Think about that for a minute. It's expedient for you. It's expedient for you. that one person should die so that the whole nation not perish. Now, he did not say this out of his own initiative, but being a high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. And not for the nation only. And that's where we come in. Not for the nation only, but in order that he might also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. Who's that? Who is that? That's us. We're included. That what was about to take place, Caiaphas says, by prophecy, he didn't know it, but he spoke it. That one man who had just screamed out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And the dead rose. That man was to die on the cross so that not just the Jews, but that all people might get the benefit. He didn't have a clue what he was saying. If I had been there, I wouldn't have understood it either, I don't believe. Standing on this side of the cross 2,000 years later, I said, I think I got it. I think I got it. So from that day on, they planned together to kill him. So Jesus left there, and says he didn't walk publicly among the Jews, but went away to the country near the wilderness in the city called Ephraim. Ephraim was about 18 miles from Jerusalem, Ephraim was. And it was kind of a desolate place and not heavily trafficked. And so Jesus and his disciples were there. Now, we have counts of about 3 Passovers that are recorded. Jesus went to all the Passovers, obviously. It was part of the Jewish law. But we have recorded the last 3 Passovers in the Gospels. This will be the last Passover for Jesus. And the people who were looking for him, some looking for him to see him do some more wonderful things, some wanted to hear him continue to talk and teach. Some of them wanted him killed. Jesus knew what was coming. What if I could convince you that within a month you're going to die? If I could convince you of that, would you do anything different? He had escaped many times, we've read in John. They kept trying to kill him. But he knew it was going to happen. There's no doubt. Matter of fact, we'll read it here in just a minute. There's no doubt he knew exactly what was going to happen. What do you think his mood was? Listen, the disciples had no idea that the crucifixion waited for Jesus. They didn't know that. Remember, Thomas said, hey, guys, when Jesus said he's going back to Bethany, he said, come on, guys, let's go with him. We'll die with him. He didn't know there was going to be a crucifixion. He thought there'd probably be a stoning, because that's why they tried to get him 2 or 3 times in recent months. They're trying to kill him. Let's go with him. Let's go die with him. No. They had no clue of the kind of death that he would suffer. And he had to get down to some very specific words later that they still couldn't quite understand. So Jesus comes back to Bethany after he had already raised Lazarus from the dead. He'd gone into hiding. He now comes back because the Passover was there, and you do not miss the Passover. And the people knew that. Verse 1, chapter 12. Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany. It's the house of figs, I think I told you that. He came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they made him a supper there. And Martha was serving. But Lazarus was the one who was one of those reclining at the table with him. Now Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume, a pure nard, and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Judas objects to this. You know, there are in the Gospels there are 4 counts of Christ's being anointed. Two of the accounts were recorded for the same event. The first one that we have, I think it was in Luke. It was John the Baptist was still alive, and a lady had put perfume on Christ's head. And then there's 2 other accounts of the same event in Matthew and Mark, and then you got this account in John, and this account in John took place in Bethany, and she wiped his feet with her hair. And the next account we'll read, he's only 2 days away from crucifixion, and there's another anointing of Jesus. And Judas seeing this, and it's not the first time that the disciples have said, why? Why would you put that much money into a perfume and put it, we could have taken that money and used it for our ministry, for our mission. And as I was reading that, I thought, what would I have said? What would I have thought? And then I asked myself, if I thought it was worthy thing, Because if you read that, it doesn't tell, and you get all kinds of numbers, but most scholars say it was about a year's worth of wages. The average wage was about a year's worth of your earnings going to buy perfume that you put on a man's feet. How much would you contribute? How much would you put? How much money would you pull out of your wallet to buy perfume to put on the feet of Jesus? I just think about it. That's a lot of. It wasn't pocket change. It wasn't pocket change. It's a year's worth. I'm back to that you were there type thing. You're there now. What are you going to do? You're going to complain? You're going to question that? You could do a lot of good with that money. Now remember, the disciples of Jesus weren't rich. They were humble people of the Jewish nation. Most of them fishermen, laborers.
Do you think she knew, she understood what she was actually doing at this time?
I don't think she knew that he was about to be crucified. But I do think that she believed with all her heart that her brother came out of that cave because this was the Son of God. That's what she said. Or, we know you from God.
She had seen the proof, or seen what Christ had done.
Yeah, she was responding out of her love for Jesus, what he had done, and there wasn't any amount of money that could keep her from putting that perfume, I don't believe, on his feet. No, I don't think you could have talked her out of it. I don't think you could have sat down and logically explained to her that that's a year's worth of money that you're about to pour on this man's feet and then you're going to wipe it with your hair. Are you kidding me? I don't think you could have convinced her. Anything like that. My question is, what would you have done? What would you do? How much do you love and respect this Son of God? What would you do? I don't know. I try to put myself in the position, but it's an impossible task for me because, like most of you, we work for our money, and to save money is not an easy thing in these days. Never was in those days either. Nothing's changed. Money's money. Value is value. You use it to take care of yourself and to the ones you love. Why would you put that hard-earned money into perfume that's going to evaporate into the air? You'll smell it for a little while, and then it's gone, and what have you accomplished? What have you accomplished? And Jesus said about one of the ladies that did that, said, you guys leave her alone. She'll be remembered. Wherever the gospel goes, she'll be remembered. Why do you think this story is in the Bible? What's the lesson? What's the point of recording this? Is there a lesson in there for us? What would you do for Jesus?
We can't do it.
You can live for him.
That's still not enough.
You live for him. And the best you can do is not good enough. And so what bridges your ability, your inability, and your ability to worship him, and you can't live the perfect life to make the perfect sacrifice, it's impossible. What are you going to do? And what will cover the gap between what you do and what you should do but don't do is called grace. That's the bridge. The only way I can understand it, that's the bridge. For by grace are you saved through your faith, and that not of yourself. It is a gift from God, so that no man can boast. I just find that to be an amazing, amazing part of the Scripture.
Kind of one other, just another aspect to think about, the fact that what we talked about, Lazarus coming forward, Christ was there. Here it is, Mary's anointing Jesus. Judas is here. Judas was probably at the grave too, wasn't he?
I wouldn't doubt it.
And he saw the
He knows.
But as we see on in this verse, or in this verse, it talks about verse 6, he didn't care for the poor because,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've read some things about Judas and how people try to justify what Judas did and why he did it, and I mean, they walk away. You're thinking, well, poor old Judas, poor old Judas. Well, here in John, he makes it pretty clear. To me, he makes it real clear. Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii? It's about a year's wage, and given to the poor people? Now, he said this not because he was concerned about the poor, because he was a thief. Now, you don't just say that casually. If you're going to call somebody a thief, you better know. He said he's a thief. And he had the money box, and he used it to pilfer what was put in it. John wasn't a happy camper about that. The other writers don't really point that out, but John says not good. Jesus said, "Let her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial." What does that mean? Now, if you're there and you don't quite understand the crucifixion moment that's coming, you don't quite understand that. Because after all, he's the king. He's going to be the king of the kingdom. And the Jews believed that the king would never die. It's from the prophecies. The king is going to live forever. And so Jesus is saying, my burial. She's going to keep the perfume for my burial. In other words, she's not going to use all of it. Not going to use all of it. She's going to save some. That's what most scholars believe anyway. I don't have an answer. I don't know what that means exactly, but that's what they conclude, is that there was a burial coming, and there were spices that were put on Christ's body. We'll catch that later. The large crowd of the Jews then learned that he was there, and they came. Not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. I want to see the proof. I want the proof. And you know what? I'm kind of like that. If you're going to tell me something that is so amazing, I'd really like to see it myself. I really would. And if you were to come to me, not having the story, the events revealed to us in the Holy Scripture, and somebody were to come in and say, hey, there's a guy down there at the cemetery, and he just told a corpse to get up, and he did. I want to go see. I want to see the man that was dead and now alive. I want to see it. Seeing's believing. I want to see it. They want to see this man, Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. But the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death. Got to get rid of this guy. He's walking around. People know who he was. They know who he... Thank you. I got 1 minute. They know who he was. They know who... He's alive. And everywhere he goes, people are going to look at him and know that Jesus raised him from the dead. We got to kill Lazarus. What kind of logic is that? Because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and were believing in Jesus. Now, we'll pick it up where Jesus enters Jerusalem next week, Lord willing. And I want you to think about what must be going through Jesus' mind as he heads for what he knows is going to be the most painful death that they could possibly inflict on a human being. And we'll cover this next week, but he said, what am I going to do? It's for this reason. Am I going to ask God not to let this happen? But he said, but that's why I'm here. That's what it's for. But the night when he knew it was just going to happen tomorrow, he said, Father, can you let this cup pass from me? That's the human side of Jesus Christ. He was flesh. He had the same emotions, the same pain, the same goals that we all have. Keep yourself from harm. Don't hurt yourself. Don't go to places where you know you're going to get hurt. If you're going to die, die peaceably at night in your sleep. Don't hung on a cross. Goodness. Why? Why? There's the questions for next week. Thank you.
Christmas.